Okay, so real quick off the bat, again, this is a consumer's perspective, not a developer. I'm not a developer at all. I don't develop anything, and I do advocate for saving games, not killing games. Ross's video I thought was fine. It was good. Initiative's good. I've signed it myself. I actually don't know how it's doing. Let me look it up real quick. Almost a quarter signatures now of the signatures that are needed. Again, Finland's just knocking this thing out the park. Sweden's very close. Denmark's pretty close as well. All right, so yeah, I do support the initiative. Go sign it. It's a good cause, and it's more about my opinion on Thor's takes. Again, I'm not going out of my way to harass this guy in any way. I don't really see a point in doing that. Just trying to get a discussion going. However, I think what he talks about in this video is not totally in good faith.
Hi, my name is Jason Thor Hall, also known as PirateSoftware Online. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I own my own studio, PirateSoftware, by the same name, which is an indie studio, and I've been here for about 8 years now. I also run a massive community. We've got about 180,000 people in Discord, and most of what I do is try to teach other people how to make games, teach them that they can make games, show them the tools to do so, and try to do everything without any paywalls or bullshit in the way. It's incredibly important to me that we keep making games and that the next generation has the tools to do so that our medium doesn't die out. And it never will. And that's the whole intention of all of this. So with that in mind, that community brought me this and tried to get me to sign it. And I don't want to. Number one, I can't because I don't live in Europe. But number two, I wouldn't sign it even if I could. And I'm going to kind of go through this and try to explain the reasoning as to why that would be the case.
All right.
Without all of the internet hate machine that's grown up around it. So let's go into how this works and why this is an issue to me. First things first, what is an initiative? So an initiative is actually not law. It is something that you put together so you can put it up in front of representatives and they can start the conversation.
Yep.
The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And the reason why...
All right, so that's his first take. Hey, form. That's his first take. It's that this initiative starts off by talking about the wrong thing, and I highly disagree about that. I think Thor, I mean, he hasn't explained his point of view yet, but I think the conversation that he brings to the table is also another conversation that we do need to have, just for clarity for consumers and for developers to be honest with us. This, however, is an initiative to keep games as a playable product after its end of life. This is a way to get developers to either patch out the game or add some sort of new feature where you can host a game by yourself and you can play the game. This is not about live service games specifically. It's about all the games that have multiplayer or are fully offline. It doesn't really matter. We should be preserving every single game that comes out because they are art and they should be experienced by multiple people. Whether that's now or down the line. I think that's a good thing.
Is specifically on this initiative. Under its own description, it says, this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional playable state.
Yes.
Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. This isn't always possible in all video games, and it doesn't call out the specific practice that this is supposedly trying to defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games.
So again, a lot of people have already said and regurgitated this, which is it is an initiative. It is going towards politicians that might not understand the nuances of how games work and what categories they fit into. So keeping it vague and simple to understand, I think, is the correct way to go. Once they understand the problem, we can start getting into the nuances and setting up a way to get the law going. I don't think having this be worded vaguely is a bad thing at all. Let's continue.
How would you keep League of Legends in a functional playable state?
Well, you wouldn't, because League of Legends came out before this law is even going to get passed, right? And even if this does become law and it gets passed, I guarantee you games until 2028 or something like that probably will not have to do anything that this law states. However, games created from a certain point will have to now develop their games with the thought process of having an end-of-life plan, which is not a thing that's that far-fetched, because a lot of companies do this, whether it's their products or just a company themselves. They have end-of-life plans for if shit goes wrong or if they just want to shut down, right? This is nothing different, and we're just asking it to be done with games because games are art and we want to play video games down the line.
You'd have to re-architect the entire game. The game is what is called client-server. So in client-server models, there's a server and there's a client, and all of the math, all of the game, everything happens on the server. The client just displays it. And the reason we want to do it that way is so that you can't teleport around and do a billion damage. You don't trust the client. You trust the server. The client just displays what it's told.
And again, using League as an example of this, I don't know, again, the nuances of how League is built. However, World of Warcraft is a game where you connect to Blizzard servers. I assume that it's client server because you're playing on their servers and you need their servers to run. However, people can create their own private servers and play the game that way. I think one of the good things that could come out of this is the fact that if they shut down and, you know, the game is now offline and you can only play offline, somebody could come up with a private server for that game and you can play online with other people. And I don't think that the company, whether it's ended the product or shut down the company itself or the publisher or whatever, should have any legal reasons to shut that down. They should not have the right to do that because they stopped the production and support of the, well, game.
Right? So if we wanted to re-architect this, we'd have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and somehow make that playable in a multiplayer-only video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games. Why is it calling out all games? And it's really easy to say like, oh, you know, that'll get worked out down the line.
It will.
But we're dealing with government here.
Yep.
If we're going to be putting up these types of ideas, specifically in front of government, we need to be calling out the right issues, especially if you don't have precedent set. Because now you're going to be setting precedent on something that doesn't make any sense with people that may not understand the nuance of our industry.
Again, I don't know all the nuance in the industry, but I don't think it's the wrong conversation to make, and I don't think it doesn't make sense. I think game preservation makes a lot of sense. Just like art preservation, music preservation, movie preservation, every kind of culture preservation that we do is gonna be good. It lets people experience that years down the line, decades, centuries, whatever, right? This is not a bad thing. What we're asking here is not some evil thing that it only works for video games and it doesn't happen anywhere else. This is a thing that happens everywhere else except video games, and we're trying to change that, right?
All in the name of saving games.
Yes.
I can't agree with that. So let's go into why this is happening. Right. So why did this start in the first place? What is these specific cases they've called out that are egregious? And they have one. It's The Crew. So action on The Crew. The video game The Crew, published by Ubisoft, was recently destroyed for all players and had a player base of at least 12 million people. Due to the game's size and France's strong consumer protection laws, this represents one of the best opportunities to hold a publisher accountable for this action. If we're successful in charges being pressed against Ubisoft, this can have a ripple effect on the video games industry to prevent publishers from destroying more games. First off, I don't like the idea in this that it has a player base of 12 million people. That is not how long-running games work. There is a large number of people that buy the game, and that player base slowly dwindles off until nobody is playing it anymore. If there's
I did say this on stream as well, which I completely agree with this. I think putting in that The Crew up until its death had 12 million people playing. I don't think that's true. If they had 12 million people playing, Ubisoft probably would have kept the servers going. However, we know that at least 12 million people own the game and played the game at peak, and if they want to play that game 20 years down the line, they should be able to.
There's any cost associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then eventually it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it, right? So the cost outweighs the amount of income for it. There are bad business practices that can occur in there. There are companies that will sell a online-only game as a single-player experience and kind of just put it into the TOS and hide it. But not all companies do that. When they do, we should be calling out that specific company, not all companies. So let's take a look at this and find out more about the Crew itself. If we pull up their Wikipedia, we can see that the Crew was actually created in 2014, which, much to the hatred of all of us oldies on the internet, was 10 years ago. Oh. So this was an online-only racing video game developed by Ubisoft Ivory Tower and Ubisoft Reflections and published by Ubisoft. So all Ubisoft, right? With that in mind, it said it was a scaled-down recreation of the contiguous United States and included both role-playing and large-scale multiplayer elements. So it had a massive multiplayer component to it. It is an online-only service-based game, and they shut it down 10 years later. On March 31st, 2024, Ubisoft shut down the game's servers, rendering the game unplayable, which is normal for live service games. The only thing that I can see in here that could be a problem is if they post it as not an online-only experience.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop right here because I don't know if you can look at this video and see the problem. So he's arguing that the Crew was fully online and they bought it as online, and therefore they should expect the game to shut down and be unplayable. However, if you read the line that's down here right under his last scroll, it says the single player campaign was up to 20 hours long and entailed infiltrating criminal groups, blah 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 blah, right? So on the wiki it literally says that there's a single player mode, single player campaign, up to 20 hours of this game that people bought. In fact, a lot of people have said this. I've seen people say that someone found code inside of the game that had an offline mode, and people who have played this game fully single player and played just the campaign. So it is a problem that they shut this down when half of the game was multiplayer and half of the game was a single player experience. I mean, it's literally right in the video. It says right there, the single player campaign was up to 20 minutes long.
But everything that I found online shows that the game was always marketed as online only. If you're going to be buying an online only game, that means it can only run when it's online. And if the servers need to shut down in the future, far in the future, it makes sense to me for the access to that game to be cut if it's online only. If it's a single player experience that has online only functionality specifically just to shut down the game in the future, and the online only doesn't actually add any gameplay functionality, I'd agree with you. That's a shitty business practice. But that's really rare. And in the specific cases where it does happen,
is it really rare? I think, you know, again, frequently we've seen more and more cases of this where you buy a game, you buy a single player game, or you buy a game that has single player and multiplayer, and before you can even choose whether you want to play single player or multiplayer, you have to log in with an account or you have to log into the servers to be able to access that content. And I think that's wrong. And is it rare? I don't think so. I think it's becoming more and more common, and that's why I think this initiative is a good thing to start putting forward. To stop these games from just being created and then killed for no reason.
Then we should call out that, not just all games and not all live service games. Further, there's more context to this too. The Crew itself came out in 2014, but it actually had a sequel that came out in 2018, and then it had another sequel that came out in 2023. And if we go to the Crew's SteamDB, which again is not going to be all of the player base for this, it's only going to show the ones who were playing it through Steam. It was on multiple platforms, and we look at the max here, it did start out with a sizable amount of community, and then it degraded, and it had a major drop-off in 2018, which is the same year that it launched a sequel. This is normal. When a sequel comes out, a lot of the player base, if the sequel doesn't suck, will move over to it, and then the servers effectively die. You can't run a live service game on this few players.
I agree. That's why developers should have the freedom to shut down the game and stop support. However, I don't think people should shut down a game and shut down support at the same time while immediately killing their game, rendering it inaccessible for the 12,236 people that paid for this product and are now getting shafted.
You can't. Most of the time, especially not if there's anything else that goes into it. And if we go into that anything else, and we could see that there was license problems. So on December 14th, 2023, Ubisoft delisted the Crew and its expansions from digital platforms, suspended sales of microtransactions, and announced that the game's servers would shut down on March 31st. So they gave them 3 months. Usually I would say, hey, 6 months is probably a better deal, but if they're going to do 3 months, they're going to do 3 months. The only thing that I'd be interested outside of that is if there was a contractual obligation to do more than 3 months and they didn't follow it, if it was in the terms of service or not. Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies. And a 10-year running game likely means that they had license to them for 10 years. And that means that it would likely reopen for negotiation. Now, I understand that's speculation, but I've seen this type of a deal many times in the industry while I've been working in it. So it's not unlikely. If you're going to have to renegotiate on a game that has so few players and is not turning a profit anymore, you're probably just going to forgo the renegotiation. And if those servers are aging, you're not going to want to recreate that infrastructure. And there are some people that'll say, well, just make it all single player. Well, I've explained that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're
all right, real quick, I just want to see, because let me just look up Forza Horizon 2. One and two online service closures. So they had an official thing on their. These games are not a very small population. We're closing the online services so that we could focus. Please note that due to the age of these games services, while the single-player experience in both games will remain playable, any online functionality such as matchmaking, leaderboards, and the browsing download of online user-generated content, including liveries, vinyls, tuning setups, and photos, will not be available from August 22nd. 2023. So as we read right here in Forza Horizon's own page, which have the same type of licensing that the crew had where they licensed the cars, they also ran out of license, they didn't have enough players, and they shut down the servers. However, they fully kept their single player experience in both Forza Horizon 1 and 2 fully playable, so you can still play it. And I guarantee you that if someone really wanted to, they could somehow figure out how to make a server for this and people could play together. Why was the crew any different? I think it's because Ubisoft is a shit fucking company and they don't really give a fuck about us gamers or consumers.
You're making it all single player, you'd have to carve off all of that, and it's developer time and money. When you already have sequels out and the game has basically no players left anyway, it makes more sense to just move on.
Yep.
I don't find that to be a problem from the developer perspective, and I understand that people find that to be a problem from the player perspective. These are two different ideologies, and that's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it because I understand the burden that puts if we raise that problem in the way that we are right now. If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them. And we're going to miss out on adventures like Final Fantasy XIV. And
again, I think this is just pure lies.
Run their live service game indefinitely.
Nobody is asking these companies to run the servers forever, just having a way that we can boot up the game, play it. That's it. It doesn't have to require server hosting. It doesn't require anything. It requires a simple patch or something of the same thing, or even just put it in base games so you don't have any other work down the line. Just before the game even comes out, just put in an offline mode. That's all you got to do. It's not really a big burden that you're getting as a developer. I feel like it's not that much of a big thing to ask to just, once you shut your servers down, let me at least hit the fucking single player button, or let me host it locally. And if people want to figure out how to do servers for it, don't stop them. That's it.
Or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them. And we're going to miss out on adventures like Final Fantasy XIV. And
I think it's actually funny here that he mentions that we're going to miss out on adventures like Final Fantasy XIV, and I think he's absolutely right. Because at some point, Final Fantasy XIV will shut down, and you'll have no way to actually experience all of those expansions again in your life. You've only been able to do it so far up until now, and if they shut down in the future, you'll never get to play them again, which is super, super sad.
Even though I don't play anymore, League of Legends, or any other live service game, any of them. You're talking everything, like even phone games, as funny as that is. A lot of people don't realize that phone games require online-only activity. What about things like Pokemon Go? What about stuff like Monster Hunter Now? What about any of these? We'd never get any of them. And that's why I think this needs to not be vague. It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements. That's the problem. So now we're going to go to Ross, otherwise known as Accursed Farms, the creator of this initiative, and one of the ones that's pushing it the most online. I'm going to let him say exactly why he thinks that this will go through very easily and why it is important, and then I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with it.
Comes law in the EU? Yeah, it might be. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I think if we get the signatures, this passes. Why do I say that? Well, it's a few factors. Politicians like easy wins. And this doesn't require them to do much at all. And unless it involves gambling or protecting children, politicians generally don't care about video games. So this isn't of big consequence to them or most of their constituencies.
I'm going to stop it there for a moment. The assertion that politicians just like easy wins, so this legislation will go through, or that politicians don't care about a multi-billion-dollar global industry and that it doesn't matter to their constituencies is incredibly absurd to me. I don't think this is the right direction at all for a movement like this. I think it's incredibly damaging and it makes our entire industry look bad, both on the player side and the developer side. If we're going to be putting forward anything that may eventually turn into legislation, it should be passing because it's the right thing to do for consumers and developers and that there's some kind of a middle ground, not just because it's an easy win and politicians don't care. This sets
So I think here Thor is being kind of disingenuous, just kind of nitpicking the language that Ross used by saying, oh, politicians like easy wins, this might really pass. I think he's just taking it way too seriously, and he's thinking about it, again, he argues that we shouldn't be signing this because politicians like easy wins, but because it's the right thing to do. Why can we not say both? I'm pretty sure everybody here thinks that this is the right thing to do. I don't think anybody wants to lose their games, and saying that politicians like easy wins, well, fucking hell, that might just be true, or that might just be a lie. Either way, I'm pretty sure this is the right thing to do, whether it's for both consumers or developers. I mean, sure, developers might have a little bit more work to have to deal with, but consumers will leave off way, way better than we are right now with the way that we're being treated with our games nowadays. So again, why can you not say both? Why is it a problem that he said that politicians like easy wins? Even if he was wrong, this is still the right cause, and it could have been just a blunder, right?
not just because it's an easy win and politicians don't care. This sets us off on a completely wrong foot.
EU law is already on.
Also, yeah, about the politicians don't care. I think they do care. It's just that they don't really understand it. And that could become a problem. And that is why I think the wording should be vague when we're starting to talk about the issue, because they might not understand all the nuances like we do. We're fucking chronically online. We're in our own echo chamber. We think everybody knows this. They don't, okay? They might really be dumb about video games. We need to write it as easily as they can understand it.
Clear on a lot of this practice anyway.
And that's dangerous. If we're going to be setting precedent, which could change the way that law works all the way down the road, then we need to be sending the right message, which this is sending a vague message that doesn't cover the actual problem. So this is not a win to me. This is a huge risk.
And we would be making it easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it?
In the case of live service games, in the terms of service for those, you are not buying the game.
Okay. Who the fuck is reading TOS? Also, TOS is not a thing you sign. It's a thing you agree with. You say, yeah, sure, whatever, get me into the game. These companies have been hiding shit in the TOS for years, and that's bad. Okay? They shouldn't write in the live service TOS that, hey, we might have to shut this game down and you don't actually own this game. Why did it say buy or purchase when I bought it, though? And why am I being charged $70 or sometimes even more for deluxe editions nowadays? $120 for goddamn Assassin's Creed Shadows if 3 years down the line it's going to shut down, and what's going to happen to my game? It's going to be gone. That's just literally burning money. That's not a good thing. If I buy, I'll give the example I gave on stream yesterday. If I buy this fucking keyboard, I get to keep this keyboard for the rest of my life. It doesn't matter if the company shuts down. It doesn't matter if I break it, I can repair it. It doesn't matter anything. I bought it and I get to keep it and use it until it's no longer usable. It shouldn't be anyone else's fault why this stops working. Okay, maybe fucking hell, your wife spills red wine all over your keyboard. Fucking hell, sure.
You're buying a license to the game. And that's the part that's really different here. If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms. But if we're under this weird idea that we need to get rid of all live service games or damage that practice in any way to keep in line with consumer policies, it is in line with consumer policies. If it
I don't think anybody that's signing this petition wants live service games to be gone and want to kill live service games. As a matter of fact, they want to keep them alive. They want to keep them in a playable state where they can experience it down the line, whether that's the same experience with a lot of players in a lobby, or if that's alone, it doesn't matter. It should still be preserved, and that's the bottom line. The game should be preserved. That's it.
wasn't, it wouldn't be there in the first place. So this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You're not buying the game, you're buying a license to the game. In the niche cases where a studio is trying to sell a game as if you are buying it or purchasing it or using that language specifically and they give you a live service game instead, I agree that should change. That language should change. You are not purchasing the game, you are not buying the game, you are paying to have a license to a live service experience. I get that. Is that what this is doing though? The initiative is not trying to call that out specifically. It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functional, playable state, which is not calling out the language that is being used to manipulate the player.
So Thor argues that instead of trying to get games to be preserved, we should instead just keep going as we are right now, let games die, and instead tell the players that, yeah, you're not really buying this game, you're renting it, and you're leasing it, or whatever, you're buying a license. And again, I don't see why it should be both. If you want to have a live service game after this law passes, if it passes, I don't know why you can't say, hey, you're going to rent this game, we're going to shut down at some point, and shit, maybe if you want to run your own server later, that's up to you, but we're not going to provide any more support once we shut down, and you are buying this product knowing that full well. I don't understand why that's a problem. Again, this is not really like a conversation that we shouldn't having. We should be having both conversations. However, I think it's more important that right now we work on preserving the games the fastest way possible and then work on the language, because, well, people like me who are, again, chronically online and understand what these companies are doing, we already know that we're not buying games, and that's why we are not buying the games. However, there's people that keep buying the games because they think they're buying the games, and they don't really understand the nuances and what's happening behind the scenes like we do. So we need to protect those people, and we need to protect ourselves. We should be able to have every game playable at any point, no matter the whats, the ifs, and the buts. People painted paintings 200 fucking years ago, and they're still hung up on walls, and they still work. As long as people don't set it on fire, or break it, or rip it, they're there, and nobody can take it away from you.
Call that out specifically, not this vague bullshit.
And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with.
That's really gross to me as well. The idea that this is just a diversion from serious topics and they can get an easy win in and we can just push it through and there won't be a lot of pushback on it and they're not going to have to think about it too hard. That's crazy dangerous, dude. If you're going to be setting precedent, if you're going to be putting forward something that you want to start a conversation to eventually become legislation, and these are the reasons for it, not only can I not agree with the initiative, but I can't agree with you. And I think that the tactics that you're using here are really disgusting. So
I think Thor goes off on Ross a little way too much here for absolutely no reason. Maybe he does have his own reasoning, but saying that, okay, yeah, politicians most likely have more serious and important things to deal with than game preservation. In their eyes, they probably don't value both arguments in the same scale. However, it could be true, it could be a lie, it doesn't really matter, it's still the right thing to do. Like you said, we should be pushing this because it's the right thing to do and not because of Ross put in his video. Again, I think he's just being really harsh, and I think this, he's specifically picked this part where Ross talks about politicians to completely say later on here in his comment, thinking that kind of language is okay, puts him squarely on my not worth it to talk to list. And this is a really bad way to look at it, because he's a developer and Ross is a consumer, and they both should be having a conversation about what's been done. And Thor refuses to do it. He doesn't want to talk to him. He said he'd rather talk to Asmongold and Louis Rossman, which is another really good content creator. And I would still like to see this. However, I would also like to see Thor talk to Ross, because I think it would be good for the whole initiative and for both developers and consumers. However, Thor is kind of just saying, nah, he's not worth it to talk to. I don't want to talk to him, which is fair. That's what he wants to do. It's okay.
So yes, I won't agree with that, and I won't agree with Ross. There's no way around that. I think this is gross. To sum it all up, no, I will not be supporting the initiative Stop Killing Games. You're not going to change my mind on it because I find this language to be incredibly vague and damaging to the rest of our industry. I think that it will be bad for both developers and players down the line in the way that it is currently written. And I think that...
Would it be bad for developers and consumers down the line both with the way that it's written? I don't think so. We're just asking for games to be playable once the companies are no longer providing support. In fact, it might be bad for developers, but it's extremely good for consumers, Because nowadays we're paying for games, we're paying for products that down the line are being taken away from us, and that's not okay. So is it bad for developers? Shit, it might be. It might give them extra work, but I don't think it's fair to us consumers that we keep buying games and they keep getting taken away. And it's not the fact that it's licensing, it's also the fact that we can't preserve these games to play later down the line. They're just gone. From one day to the other, you're playing the game all happy, and the next day the game is no longer playable, you no longer have access to it, and well, go fuck yourself. Go play something else, right?
That starting a conversation that doesn't get to the core of the issue is both wasted time and leads to potentially bad outcomes. So, if we want to talk about this, let's talk about the actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that. That needs to go away. A player should be well informed at the point of purchase that they are purchasing a license, not buying a game. And the reason that
And again, I agree with him that we should be informed about this, mainly for the rest of the people. However, why are you not advocating for the preservation of games? Why is that such a big deal to you? Pretty much what I'm getting from what he's saying is, no, we shouldn't be trying to preserve games. We should instead change the way that they're talking to us and saying that we're buying the game when we're not buying the game so they can keep killing games. So you're saying it's the wrong conversation when the name of the fucking initiative is literally stop killing games and you're trying to keep killing games. We don't want that. We want to keep playing our games. That's not something fucking crazy to ask about.
we have those licenses in the case of client-server interactions, like we had before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheat at them. They revoke your license. That's why they revoke your license, to protect the gameplay of every other player that you're impacting when you cheat at these games.
Again, I don't think bringing up cheating it shouldn't be buy, it should be rent, because if you're cheating and shit, they gotta revoke your license. No, if you're trying to actively damage the experience of people that paid the same amount of money as you and they're playing in the same thing, you're gonna get fucked for it, right? If you're being fucking annoying to all these people, yeah, you should be fucking banned. If you're cheating in an online game, you should be fucking banned. And it doesn't matter if it says buy or rent.
Needs to exist, but it needs to be better informed to the player at time of purchase. So I agree on that. This doesn't bring that up, though. It just attacks all video games that have online-only components and says that they need to keep being able to be played indefinitely. That doesn't make any sense to me. Aside from
So again, game preservation doesn't make sense to him.
that, a lot of people really like live service games as they exist now. So trying to kill off all live service games, as some people have said online, doesn't make any sense either. Live service
Again, aren't the developers the ones that are doing that? Aren't the developers that are killing these live service games that they make? Because they make them and they don't know how to make games, and they make a shit game and people don't play it, and so they shut it down, and then the people who paid for it can't even play it anymore. It doesn't matter if the game's shit or not, they should be able to play it.
games are a great way to get away from the real world. They are about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse in them and then got married in them. It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience. And to destroy that just because you don't like them is very weird. I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me. I also don't think it makes sense the way that Ross is posing this is why it's going to pass. I think that's incredibly inflammatory and could lead to a lot of damage to both what he's trying to stop and to games as a whole. To say that the government just doesn't care and this is an easy win and we're going to get it through is disingenuous. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global industry. To think that the government isn't going to be meticulously looking through this and looking for flaws and holes is absurd. So I don't think that's honest at all, and I find it disgusting. So
again, here he says that the government is going to be looking for any loopholes or holes in the argumentation for passing this law. Well, that's why it's vague. It's so that we can talk about it and they can look at these holes and they can ask questions and we can answer and we can fucking preserve games.
For everyone who's mad about that, fine. Be angry about it. I'm not going to change my stance on that because I can't agree with this, both as a dev and a player. I see the danger involved, I see the vagueness in the language, and it doesn't make sense to me. If we want to fight for better conditions for players, then fight the actual problem. Don't make new ones.
Is game preservation a new problem? Well, I think it's being more and more talked about now, but Ross has been talking about this as a problem for a long time. And again, I'm not upset that he's got this argumentation. I'm more upset of the fact that he won't talk to Ross. He just refuses to engage in a conversation where he can put his points forward as to why it shouldn't go through, and Ross can put his forward, and they can discuss it and talk about it. Instead, he's just saying, no, I'm not talking to Ross. This is my take. I don't support it, and that's it. So then he made a second video, which we're going to watch now.
Hi, my name is Jason Thor Hall, also known as PirateSoftware, and the other day I put out a video called Stop Killing Games, saying why I would not support the initiative. Overall, it was actually quite positive. The analytics on it show that people really think it's a good idea. There's a huge amount of like ratio, and I received hundreds of comments from developers thanking me for putting it out because they can't speak publicly while they're at a business or a job elsewhere. A lot of the times, major companies will fire you if you are speaking out of turn and cause a PR disaster for those companies. And since this is such a popular thing among players, most devs aren't going to say anything to you. So I am. So let's discuss the most common requirement of the initiative, which is games have to be left in a functional, playable state. Now, what happens if that game is a online-only live service game? Well, if you want that to stay in a functional, playable state, that means the devs have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off the game to be a single-player experience now.
Law doesn't work retroactively, which means games that are made now and probably in 3 years are not affected by this law. They do not have to comply to this law. However, games going forward will have to keep in mind that they probably need an offline mode when their game ends. I've changed my view on this. I don't think devs should be required to give out server binaries because they'd have to probably, pay someone to have servers going on, whether that's a subscription for some servers, whether it's a license, whether it's whatever. They shouldn't have to give that away. However, if people come up with private servers, they shouldn't be able to shut them down.
Some way to keep it functional and playable, right? Now, many of you are requesting, yes, I should get the server binaries so that I can go and make private servers for this. But that doesn't make a lot of sense in the real world. And the reason why is because it leaves developers open to abuse. So let's explore that a little bit. Let's say that you made your own video game and you made a live service game. Maybe it's an MMO, maybe it's something else, right? And let's say that I want to monetize that game, but you don't allow monetization of the game by any other party. This makes sense because most creators don't allow for that. You can't just take someone else's art and profit off of it. Normal, right? So then I go, well, how am I going to force you to do this? Under this initiative, you would have to release the server binaries or keep the game in a functional, playable state at end of life.
Pretty sure I read somewhere on this initiative that server binaries are not required to be given out, only that these games should be playable offline after the game shuts down. At least in my opinion, they shouldn't be forced to give out these binaries because they probably can't because they don't own the servers. They probably pay someone else to host the servers for them. So it's unfair to ask this of developers. However, let's imagine that that's the case.
So I hit you with a ton of bots. I hit you with a ton of exploits. I attack your community. I destroy your Reddit. I go after your business. I go everywhere that I possibly can to make this cost as much as it possibly can for you. And it's not hard to do this. We saw the exact same thing happen in TF2 recently.
TF2 did plummet to overwhelmingly, oh Jesus Christ, I can't speak, overwhelmingly negative on Steam. However, as of, well, a long time ago probably, I checked it yesterday and it was very positive, very positive. The issue was that the official servers had bots, Valve didn't deal with it and still kept the game running with official servers, so people were like, hey, this shit is bad, and then they fixed it and people reverted their bad review into a good one because Valve did what they should have done. It didn't kill the game because there were more ways to play the game, more servers, community servers, other shit like that. And I don't think any company that gets bombarded by bots and exploits is going to die because of that. No matter how much this costs the developer to fix, I imagine it costs a lot more to buy 700 copies of whatever this game is to get bots running, and exploits can get fixed. So sure, they might ruin the game for a little bit, but they get fixed and patched out eventually. Reddit being taken down, again, this is not something that you can do legally. You can't, like, this leads to your ass getting sued if you do shit like this. If people know who you are and can somehow find out that you're putting bots and exploits and doing all this shit, you can very well get sued because you're trying to kill a company, and, you're gonna fuck around and find out.
Happened in TF2 recently. The massive amount of bots that were attacking the game. This is not infeasible. This is something that is very easily attainable today. And let's say...
And again, I still have yet to see a game that's died because people influxed it with bots and exploits. Even if the game is shit, like the example that I gave last time, which is Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad's been dead for a while. If I look up SteamDB and we find a Suicide Squad. So this game came out, had measly 5,000 players, went down, something happened here, people came back, and this game right now is running with a little bit under like 300 people, 400 people, right, for the last couple of days. And even months, right? It's been terrible. And no matter how shit this game is, somehow nobody had the idea to just, hey, this game's so shit, nobody's playing it. Let me just like put a bunch of bots in here so they have to waste a bunch of money and do this shit because this game was so ass and they treated this like shit and they destroyed characters that we loved. That's never happened, which is weird, but okay, maybe this case isn't the best case to make, right? Because, you know, the people wouldn't really get anything out of it from doing that other than satisfaction. However, back to my argument, it's if they do this to profit off of this company for shutting down and having their server binaries, it still doesn't make any sense because a lot of people are going to have access to those server binaries. They can set up their own server and run it for free, and whoever's trying to monetize it is going to get shafted because they wasted a bunch of money trying to kill this company. This argument doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But let's keep going.
That this goes on long enough that your game dies because you can't afford it anymore, and your studio has to shut down. At end of life, you now have to release those server binaries to keep the game in a functional playable state. At which point I take those, I create a private server, and I monetize it. Some people have said, well, simply don't allow monetization of the server. Well, who's going to enforce that? If you want a government initiative to enforce that, that means the government has to build a registry of all of those games and all of that intellectual property that shouldn't be monetized, and then somehow enforce that.
Again, I think this is kind of a bad take, right? Because you pay for a product, you don't own the copyright, so it's not like you can resell the game of your own volition. It needs to be the original developer or publisher that's selling the game. What is an example I can give of something like this? You know, I can't have a company shut down and then raid their warehouse and then start selling off the keyboards that they left behind, right? That's not okay because that's not the developer that's selling them. In fact, they stopped selling them themselves. So it's I would think that's probably illegal if you try to do that thing. Same thing with like buying a disc and burning a bunch of other discs and trying to sell those discs with, you know, music or movies or whatever. That's illegal. That's redistribution, and you are not the copyright owner. You cannot do that. So again, I think this example is pretty bad.
With no one owning it, because those studios have shut down. That's going to be a massive burden. On top of that, if you want to go the other route and say the company has to go and control it, well, what if the company's not around anymore? Is that just able to be monetized now?
As soon as they kill the game, they don't have to have anything to do with it.
This was
in fact, they shouldn't have anything to do with it because they killed the game.
Through abuse of the original creator. I don't think that's a good route. And this scenario gets even worse if you do allow monetization. Because now I can just kill off your company and then monetize the server and no one will ever come after me. Now it's even more of a problem. So allowing monetization of this work is strictly worse. And for those of you out there that say, oh, this can be done right now, I could just destroy your studio and take your stuff anyway. You could, but this allows a route for it to be legal to do so.
I think that's a pretty bold lie. Passing this initiative does not make this situation something legal. Again, you're not only attacking servers maliciously with bots and exploits, which is already illegal, you can't profit off of somebody else's product due to copyright laws. The two illegal things don't make a right. You know, this isn't math. Minus and minus do not make a plus. This is two illegalities that you're committing, and you just can't do it. Making sure the game doesn't die will not make this legal. It will never make this situation legal.
That's the problem. After putting this out publicly and talking to people about it, this specific scenario on both YouTube and Discord and Reddit and a bunch of other locations, I got a couple of takes back. We're going to start with the most extreme position and kind of go from there. So in the most extreme, people said live service games shouldn't exist at all, and the initiative will kill them off for good, and that's a good thing. Well, you don't get to define what players get to play or not play. You also shouldn't be able to get to define what developers build or don't build.
You also shouldn't be able to define whether we preserve games or not. Sorry, I had to be a little sassy there.
You should not have creative control over the developers, and you should not have control over what is in my Steam library or on my phone. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. Aside from that, the initiative does not purport to kill live service games. It would just make it incredibly difficult to build said games and add a lot of risk to it, which is why I'm bringing all of this up and why I don't support the initiative in the first place.
Okay, look. If making every single game that comes out after the law is passed preservable and being able to be played centuries down the line, and the counter to that is that live service games die, I don't give a fuck about live service games. I really don't. I like live service games. I've played a lot of them over my life. But if live service games need to die for us to be able to keep the games that we bought, then fine. Let it be that way. I think if I'm buying a game, I should be able to play it 100 years down the line if I'm still alive. And nobody should be able to stop me.
A lot of people don't realize that this will slowly diminish live service games in the market because it's not an incentive for us to build them anymore, which means you get less multiplayer live experiences.
I think that's also not true. We've seen a lot of free games, free-to-play games that are online. You can most likely still make MMOs. All you got to do is put an option, or not even put in an option, just write the code that I can start my own server, hide it, and then you kill the game, and you just bring the option back. And your game is totally fine. It worked how it should have. It was monetized how it was, and we still get to play it.
Sucks. I like live service games. I enjoy playing things like Final Fantasy XIV.
Me too.
I enjoy going and playing in games in the past, at least, like League of Legends. These are games that are live service. They require a live service to run. And
he's giving the argument that he loves to play FF14. He loves to play other old MMOs. Fact of the matter is, if you want to go back to a 2000s MMO, it's most likely shut down and there's no way for you to play it. Don't you feel kind of bad about that? Wouldn't you like to at least enter the fucking game? Look at your save, look at the character that you played back then, look at your gear and be like, oh man, I have so many stories about how I got all this gear. You could look at your old friends list. I mean, well, if servers shut down, you probably wouldn't have access to your friends list, but you can look at all of these things and just be like, oh my god, I'm so glad that I can at least log onto this fucking game and look around and do bullshit around. Like, what's so wrong about that?
And you shouldn't be able to take that away from people. And if that's your only position on this, not only are you disingenuous in what the initiative is purporting to try and achieve, but you're also aggressively attacking other players instead of trying to fix something. So the next one is that this is about games preservation, and that it needs to happen to preserve these types of games for future generations and for everyone to always have forever. But I would argue that this isn't actually preserving these games. Social games, such as, let's say, Apex Legends, require a number of players to be in the match at the same time so that you can have an experience that is only able to be obtained through lots of players interacting, right? It's a multiplayer game. You need a bunch of people. How many of you have felt negatively when an MMO dies or when a live service game dies? Oh, dead game. There's only 5 people online. Why would I play that? So why would you want to preserve a game in that state?
Because I could still play it. You know, I probably can't host a full Apex Legends match by myself. However, I can probably get in, enter a match, host a match myself, walk around the map, shoot the guns that were there, look at my cosmetics, and shit, if somebody comes up with a private server for that game, then there's a way to connect to other people and play the game how it could have been. Why does Apex Legends need to completely get Thanos snapped just because there's only 5 players? Shut down the servers because it's costing you money and those 5 players are not paying you enough to get that shit going. But don't take the fucking game away from me.
Doesn't make any sense to me. You want to take down these live service games, put them up on a private server, and then play it with a couple of people. You're not bringing it back at its height. You're not taking a snapshot of what the game actually is. You're making it limp on in a way that doesn't make any sense.
It does make sense. It's called game preservation.
It's not preservation. And for those that may stop there and go, but private servers going to have a lot of players. Look at all the ones for World of Warcraft. Again, we talked about that. It opens up a route for abuse of the developers.
Again, I don't agree with that. World of Warcraft is a supreme and superb example of this. You bought Vanilla WoW, you bought Burning Crusade, you bought Wrath of Lich King. Cataclysm comes out, redoes the whole fucking map, breaks a bunch of other bullshit, and you cannot play Vanilla anymore. You can't play BC anymore. You can't play Wrath anymore. You have to play Cataclysm. And you paid for all 4 expansions. This is bad. However, running private servers on a game that is currently still being developed by Blizzard is probably not very legal. But the players asked Blizzard for years for vanilla servers. And you know what Blizzard said? You think you do, but you don't. And 3 years later, or 4 years later, they came out with World of Warcraft Classic, and they got a bunch of fucking returning players because they've been asking for that shit forever. The reason private servers became so popular is because the original developer did not provide you the means of being able to play the fucking product that you paid for. Now it is live service, so you have to expect shit to change, but again, we gotta preserve games, man. That game's getting more preserved than probably any other game out there that's coming out right now.
That is not a solution. And the last take that I got from this is, and it's the most reasonable to me, this is an initiative. It's not a law. Why are you upset? Just wait. I'm not going to wait. And the reason I'm not going to wait is because I see the start of this conversation not making sense. It's not including the actual developer side of the conversation. It's not showing the trials and problems that this could arise inside of the gaming industry for people who are actually making the games you play.
So again, Thor, you are the developer. You do not want to talk to Ross, and other developers that are working for other companies can't talk because they might get fired. So who's going to give us the developer side of things if you are refusing to talk to one of the people that are associated with this initiative? You're actively going out of your way to say, no, Ross is a piece of shit because he talked about politicians the wrong way in a way I didn't like. Therefore, fuck this issue. And I don't think that's very cool.
Don't have any reason to be quiet about that. And many other developers aren't going to be able to speak on this. As I explained before, it's really easy to lose your job if you're working at a major studio and try to speak out of turn on something like this, especially with something people are so passionate about. It doesn't make any sense to stay quiet. And it also doesn't make any sense to wait.
But you got to talk to someone who's part of the initiative so you can understand what they are trying to get at. You say down here, or in the other video, that you wouldn't mind talking to Asmongold and Louis Rossmann. They're not part of the initiative. They can't vote. They're Americans. And all they can do is spread the word. You need to talk to someone who understands what people are fighting for inside. In fact, there's like emails right here. So you can call the people that are responsible. You can talk to them, and you can ask questions, and you can talk to them. You can have a discussion. They say they're open for interviews. Why won't you do it? You won't talk to Ross because he said politicians like easy wins. Boo fucking who.
Until it's in a different form when I see that it has so many problems with the language as it is currently written. I should be able to be talking about this. In fact, I should be talking about this.
Yes!
I am a content creator specifically as a game developer that has worked in this industry for 20 years. This is my wheelhouse. This is what I do. So for those who are calling for me to just be silent and sit in the corner, no. With all of that being said, I do think there's a consumer protection thing that we can fix.
Again, I'm not advocating for him to be silent. I'm not advocating him to not make these videos. I'm very glad he made these 2 videos because we can talk about this and we can look at several problems that he's posing as the developer side. However, we're only going to go so much because it's 2 under 10-minute videos, or I think one is 11 minutes, or sorry, 15 minutes and 8 minutes. It's only talking about a couple of situations, and I think a lot of people have different solutions for those problems. And so we need you as a developer, as a spokesperson for the developer side of the conversation, to come out and talk to these people who are trying to push this initiative. You know, I'm not trying to bash Thor, not trying to be a bitch. I disagree with him, obviously, and I'm talking about why I disagree with him. I still don't want any ill will towards this guy. I've watched this content for a while, and I like it. So I have no reason to come out here and attack him and be a bitch. Maybe my wording is not the most, friendly thing, but that's just my opinion.
It's just not really what the initiative is about. I think that if you're going to buy a live service game, you shouldn't be told you're buying the game. You shouldn't be told that you're purchasing the game. You should be told explicitly that you are purchasing a license to that game. The reason why is because that license needs to be revoked anytime that you are cheating at the game and damaging the play experience of other players. Well,
again, I think you don't really need a license to be in place for this to happen. It's obvious that if you go to the fucking Olympics and you're zoinked out on steroids, that you're most likely not going to win anything and you're going to get banned for life. And they didn't even pay for that. There's certain things that are just not allowed due to the rules of the developer in the game. You have to accept these rules, like you said, the TOS, as soon as you open the game. So you're agreeing that you won't cheat, and if you cheat, well, you're gonna get banned, and that's fair. Developers should be able to do this.
While this is written in the TOS and the EULA, it's usually not clearly defined at point of sale. Or they throw a giant TOS in front of you and it doesn't really do anything because people skip past it. If at point of sale it says specifically, there's specific language stating that you are either leasing or purchasing a license or anything along those lines, that you're not actually buying the game directly, I think it would go a long way to informing consumers of what they're doing and protect them from some of these business practices that they didn't realize they were engaging in. That makes a lot more sense to me than force all developers to leave the game in a functional, playable state. And that's about it. That's all I really wanted to talk about with this. I hope that's clarified some things for some of you and some of the dangers that this can cause as it is currently written. If you're still mad about this, not much I can do about it. Outside of that, I'm going to be gone for the next 4 days, so if you expect me to respond or anything like that and you think I'm ducking the issue or hiding in some way, I'm not. I'm just in Vegas because there's DEF CON going on, which is a hacking convention, and it's the first vacation I've had in 5 years. I can't wait to see my friends out there. So with that in mind, see y'all later.
So yeah, that's it. That is my opinion on this whole thing. I think Thor could have had a better take if he said, I also want these games to stay alive and preserved. However, we can't go about it this way. We need to think about this. I think that would have been a way more fair take than just saying, no, this is the wrong conversation. We shouldn't be preserving online games. We should be telling you that you're not buying the game. In fact, you're just renting the game, and then just have them shut down and burn the game, right? Still don't think that's cool. I think if you create a piece of artwork, it should be available for everybody to see because it's culture. Work went into it. When you play a game, there's music, there's visuals, there's gameplay elements, there's mechanics. Everything about it that's what makes the game, not the title of the game. Just knowing that this game once existed is not enough. Having memories of playing that game is not enough. We need to have a way where we can look at these things, we can go back, we can play old games, or just play a lot of games, or all the games down the line, 20 years, 30 years, 100 years, whatever. That's my take.
I respect the hell out of Thor for being as diplomatic and polite in his video as he was, because all I can think when I read these comments and see what y'all think is, wow, gamers are fucking stupid. I don't want to be associated with you. The fact that gamers and game devs are on opposite sides of things means that gamers are wrong. It doesn't mean that game devs don't understand them. It means gamers are entitled sacks of shit.